Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Today, Chris and I are back in the saddle, and we are going to be doing part one of our legislative preview for this upcoming session. There is so very, very much to cover, even though it's a fiscal session, shorter session with restrictions on bills. Over 800 bills have been filed, and Chris and I have been diligently combing through them. Today, we're going to hit some big topics. We're going to talk about bills that address insurance cost drivers, talk about taxes, state sovereignty, elections, the Secretary of State's office, and the distribution of power in the state, and I don't mean energy. And we're going to be talking about national security and first responders. So lots and lots to get through today. So hold on to your hats. But before we get into all of the bills, all that we have to expect this session, let me read the scripture of the day. It is James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, and it is proving to be very apt already.
You always seem to get the right ones at the right time.
My fellow believers, when it seems as though you're facing nothing but difficulties, see it as an invaluable opportunity to experience the greatest joy that you can. For you know that when your faith is tested, it stirs up power within you to endure all things. And then, as your endurance grows even stronger, it will release perfection into every part of your being until there is nothing missing and nothing lacking. And one of the pastors who's influenced me the most in the last 15 years, and I've talked about him plenty before here, but his name's Bill Johnson. He's from Redding, California. Many of you are probably familiar with him. He has a quote that's been an anchor for me. He says that any thought that does not inspire hope is under the influence of a lie. And for me, that statement has been both encouraging and challenging. But when we are facing all kinds of difficulties, it's extremely important to discipline our minds and to keep a short leash on negative self-talk and negative thinking. In those times when the strain, the fear, and the doubt seem intractable, it's important to ask the Lord what lie we're believing that's not allowing us to move forward in faith and joy. And then we have to do the second part, which is to ask him for the truth to replace the lie with. So we replace it with what the Lord says about that situation or that person. And Bill Johnson also teaches another important concept, which is when we are under some kind of stress, difficulty, or spiritual attack, we're to operate or respond in the opposite spirit to what we're facing, because it causes the escalation of negativity to dissipate. And we know this is true in relational conflict, and Proverbs 15:1 confirms this by saying that a soft word turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And this is what James is teaching about in this passage. He's encouraging us to discipline our minds and our responses when we face all kinds of difficulties so that we are strengthened in our faith and build the endurance we need to become more and more like our Savior, Jesus.
Danielle, what jumped out at me in that scripture is when you said, what do we replace it with? Sometimes we get so habituated. People have been living in fear and in addiction and anxiety and depression for so long that they almost wear it like a Linus towel. It's almost like, even though it's unhealthy, even though it's debilitating and disabling, it's become somewhat comfortable to them because it's all they know. And so, and then finally, when you come to a point where you're able to get out from under those shackles, and it's like, oh my God, I'm frightened to death because I don't know what to replace it with. What do I replace it with? And we have to remember to replace it with the joy and the peace that comes from Christ. And it's just, because sometimes people are very, very afraid of letting go of things that are even the things that are causing them great pain and misery, because there's a certain perverse security in it. At least it's familiar. And even though it's familiar pain and discomfort and despair and anxiety, at least I know what it is. And I don't know what it'll be replaced with. And the fear of the unknown sometimes is even more fearful than what they're dealing with currently, as bad as it is. So I like the idea that we have to pray for the grace to replace what we are unburdening ourselves from with the joy and the peace of Christ. And that is only his grace that does that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's kind of the same thing about, I don't know, anything. I mean, just like you said, Chris, it's anything that you need to get rid of in your life. You have to have something that you're saying yes to. You have to have something bigger and better that you're believing for. Otherwise, you will cling to that former thing that's not healthy.
Yes.
And
So right. So what we're saying yes to is equally important as what we're saying no to.
yeah, absolutely. Well, we have a lot that we're going to be saying yes to, and a fair bit that we're going to be saying no to this session. And some of it might surprise people.
Might be the best segue. Might be the best segue I've ever heard, Danielle. In 300 episodes of the State of Freedom.
Chris, why don't we start out with insurance cost drivers? So if anyone missed the episode we recently did with Tim Temple, the insurance commissioner, he talked about the fact that there are certain factors that are driving up insurance rates in our state. And so this one bill by Representative Brian Glorioso, House Bill 34, is kind of the main one that we've seen come across our screens so far that's going to take a hack at that. Chris, would you talk about what this bill's aiming to do and what it might mean for the future of our insurance rates?
Sure. And first off, I believe that people should be compensated when they're injured. I believe that people have every right to be appropriately compensated when they're injured due to the negligence of another party. But what this bill does is, right now in Louisiana, if you go to trial, and let's say the original medical bill was $100,000, but the plaintiff's lawyer has worked out a deal with the provider to pay a third of that, let's say $30,000 for that medical bill. And that's the deal, and that's what will be paid. So the whole $100,000 medical bill is not owed anymore, or won't be owed. Only $30,000, or 30% of that, will be owed. Right now, the jury is not allowed to know that. Right now, the jury bases its award calculation only on the original bill, $100,000, even though the plaintiff, the injured party, doesn't owe that anymore. So the jury thinks that they're awarding the $100,000 in medical expenses because that is what is currently owed, when in reality, the plaintiff only owes $30,000. So what this bill will do, this bill will allow the jury to know what the injured party actually owes in medical expenses, so they can make the decision about whether or not they're going to award the original $100,000 bill or only the $30,000, because that's what was owed and will be paid. And we believe it's fair. We don't believe it's fair to make an insurance company pay $100,000 to an injured victim in a car wreck or any other kind of accident if he doesn't owe that money anymore. They should have to pay him for what he owes. And so if in fact this bill passes, a jury this could make a difference in hundreds and hundreds of $1,000s in special damages or medical damages that an insurance company, that a jury may not award to a plaintiff because they're not owed anymore. And so I think it could have a big and positive effect on the cost drivers for insurance companies. If they're saving hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars annually because juries are not awarding the difference between the original medical bill and what is actually owed, that could really benefit not only the insurance companies, but could, and Tim Temple said it would result in a substantial reduction in premiums, because everything an insurance company has to pay out in these judgments for injury cases, they are passing those costs down to their policyholders. There's no question. So if they get relief in this area, that should result in substantially reduced premiums for policyholders. So we support House Bill 34, Representative Glorioso's bill, and hope that it will get through the legislature and signed by the governor, which is by no means assured, because he vetoed a very similar bill to this last session.
Yeah. And just a point on that as well, Chris, I would think that this would also serve as a disincentive for anyone bringing a suit that would be far and away above what their medical expenses are, right? And it would also disincentivize trial lawyers, I would think, from trying to bring these kinds of suits if they know that they're not going to be able to get the delta.
Well, certainly it could serve as a disincentive to bring them if they know that they've got a quote unquote $500,000 medical bill, but they're only having to pay 50,000 of that or 100,000 of that, and the jury will know that, and so they substantially could get $400,000 less at trial than they otherwise would. So yeah, it could be an incentive.
Great. That's what I want to see.
The secret to losing weight 2 times faster has gone viral. See the transformations hundreds of thousands of people are experiencing around the world with the Slender Eyes drops. These homeopathic drops are proven to control appetite, support thyroid function, help balance the body's pH, improve energy, boost mood, and increase metabolic rate. I've heard firsthand testimonials from droppers in their 20s to droppers in their 80s who say that the Slender Eyes drops have completely revolutionized their lives. Try the drops today to see the results for yourself. To learn more about the Slender Eyes drops or other incredible natural wellness and lifestyle products, email me at info@freedomstate.us and put drops in the subject line, or visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. We also have links to those in the show notes. Thank you for supporting the state of freedom.
All right, next up, taxes. Everyone's eyes are on taxes and insurance right now. This is a pretty interesting bill, Chris. House Bill 333 by Representative Dixon McMakin. And on its face, it looks great, right? It says it reduces the rate of individual income tax incrementally over a period of time before ultimately eliminating the tax. That sounds great until you see that it may take until 2040 for us to reduce the state income tax. I'm pretty sure it didn't take Mississippi that long. I'm pretty sure it didn't take Texas, Tennessee, Florida that long. What's up with this bill?
Well, right now, Danielle, there's a 3% flat individual personal income tax rate in Louisiana. Under Representative McMakin's bill here, House Bill 333, that would be reduced by 0.2% every year, at least by 2%, by 0.2% every year until 2040. And if it's reduced by 0.2% every year by 2040, we will no longer have an income tax in Louisiana, personal income tax. The question that we have, I mean, we admire the motivation, we admire we admire the fact that something is being done here, but I don't believe that it should take 15 years to eliminate the state income tax in Louisiana. Not when the legislature and even the governor have been talking about how important it is to phase out the income tax. When Louisiana citizens hear about getting rid of the state income tax or phasing it out, I don't think they have 2040 in mind, 15 years down the line to get it done. Now, Dixon McMakin said that is just the floor. and he hopes that it can be done more quickly. But I mean, why not we just do it? Why don't we just implement a meaningful DOGE in Louisiana, reduce the size of government, cut the waste and the fraud in our government, and that would more than enough compensate for elimination of the state income tax right now. That's what we need to be doing. I don't think we need to be waiting until 2040 to do it. I think it should be done no later than by 2027. In fact, I think that's the year that you gave me, Danielle, this morning. You said
Yes.
that's the deadline. We need to have no individual income tax in Louisiana by 2027. So I admire the idea of this, and in principle, obviously we're moving in the right direction, but we're moving way too slowly under this bill.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Chris, what they would have told me in corporate life was hope is not a plan. You don't go into your boss's office and say, well, I hope I can get this done in 15 years for you. The boss would say, hope is not a plan, and also that's not within the timelines laid out.
And that's just not within the timelines. I'm thinking about it. By the time this occurs, I mean, I've got a 12-year-old son. He'll be, 30 years old.
Yeah.
By the time this is done with. And as you said a minute ago, Danielle, so aptly, I don't think it took, Mississippi and Texas and other states 15 years to end the state income tax. And it shouldn't take Louisiana 15 years to do it either.
No. And I think that if the state shows that it is very serious about hacking away at expenses and that are frivolous, that are, let's look at the fraud, waste, and abuse just like the federal government is. I want to make sure that we're seriously taking a look at that before we peel this back so slowly that you have grandchildren many times over before that happens.
Do DOGE in Louisiana the way Elon Musk and Donald Trump are doing DOGE on the federal level. Or just don't pretend. If we're not going to do anything that's meaningful, if we're not going to make the tough decisions and really make the cuts that need to be made and reduce the waste and fraud, then don't even start a DOGE in Louisiana, because you give people false hope.
Yeah.
And we don't want people having false hope. We need to see meaningful progress in the area of reducing the fraud and waste in our government. And frankly, I haven't seen a whole lot yet.
No, I would agree with that. The next bill, House Bill 334 by Philip Tarver, would do something that would be impactful right away to every citizen of the state, and that would be to repeal 1% of the state sales and use tax. Although 1% in the grand scheme of how much we're paying also doesn't feel like very much.
No, it doesn't. But right now it's a 0.45 sales and use tax in Louisiana. If Representative Tarver's bill passes, it will immediately go to 0.35, which is a 20% reduction in the sales and use tax in Louisiana. And even though it's marginal, even though it's not huge, at least it does something right now. And that is meaningful. That is something worth mentioning. It actually reduces taxes now, right now, in a measurable, quantifiable way, which is why we support the legislation. We wish it was more. We wish it was all the way, 1% or even a complete elimination, but it does something, and that is a good thing.
Yeah. All right. Next, moving on to state sovereignty. So House Bill 64 is being brought by Rep. Mike Johnson, and it is related to the Attorney General's responsibilities. And this one you were pretty excited about, Chris.
Extremely excited about it. You know that I'm a huge 9th and 10th Amendment fan. The 9th
Junkie,
and 10th,
some might say.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I am absolutely a lover of the 9th and 10th Amendments because they are the two amendments in the Constitution that reserve plenary authority to state governments. Any authority that is not expressly delegated in the Constitution of the federal government are reserved to the states. And so what this bill does is it would allow the Attorney General of Louisiana to, as a chief law enforcement officer of the state, to assume complete control over any time the federal government passes any law or takes any action that encroaches upon the constitutional sovereignty of the state of Louisiana. And the Attorney General would assume control over that litigation, would be responsible for challenging that federal overreach and directing any of the local DAs or local authorities with respect to that litigation. And I think it's important for there to be a very clear chain of command and a clear hierarchy of authority. And I think our Attorney General, Liz Muriel, she understands about federal overreach. Believe me, she lived through and fought through this draconian federal overreach regarding the COVID lockdowns and the COVID experimental vaccines and all that, and even suffered personally in her own family because of it. So she understands federal overreach, and I can't think of any better person or really any more appropriate office than the Attorney General to be in authority and have control over the state's response on all levels in instances of federal overreach. And just because President Trump is the president now, and we do not have, and I think he has a profound respect for states' rights and for state sovereignty. In fact, he's returning all the education to the states, which is exactly where it should be. But President Trump won't always be president. And even President Trump in his zeal could overreach at times. So it's important to have in place a very clear delineated structure for how we as a state respond to federal constitutional overreach and tyranny. And this really lays it out well and places it in the authority and under the control of the Attorney General. And I think it's a very, very good bill. And I think it will go a long way to preserve and protect our state sovereignty under the Constitution.
Yeah, and maybe two quick examples there, Chris. One is, I believe the parishes of Terrebonne and Lafourche, and somebody can correct me if I'm getting this wrong, have sued FEMA. So in that case, Liz or whoever would be AG should be able to step in and support the case or direct the local DAs, as you mentioned. In the other instance, I think the converse of that would be in a place where there's a DA that would be siding with the federal overreach, like if it wasn't another Biden type of administration, and the DA had Soros proclivities. That DA would be pushed out of the way, basically, by the AG, who would be able to stand up for the people of that parish or municipality and push back against the federal overreach. And I think that was something that would have absolutely been needed in COVID, for instance, whenever LaToya was masking everyone and shutting down small businesses across New Orleans. This would have been an incredibly important role for the AG to serve.
No question. Because right now under the law, the issue that you just described, the local authorities, the parishes would have to invite the Attorney General in order to participate. That would no longer be the case. The Attorney General would be able to assume control and participate according to its discretion in exactly the type of case you just described.
Beautiful. All right. Well, now we're going to talk about elections, the distribution of power in the state, and the office of the Secretary of State. First up is a bill that is, to me, the banner bill for the whole session. If nothing else happens this session, if we get this bill through, everyone can take a huge victory lap. And I don't think I'm overstating that one tiny bit. It's Senate Bill 226. It's being brought by Senator Valerie Hodges, and she has some co-authors, I believe, Chris, maybe Representative Amade and Rep. Chuck Owen are
correct
co-sponsors for that.
Yes.
And this is kind of going back to some of those foreign adversary bills that addressed purchase of our land and encroachment on military installations, but is taking it a step further and it's bringing a lot more security to the state. Would you talk about it, Chris?
Absolutely. The first part of SB 226 deals with land in Louisiana, and it sort of merges, clarifies, and further solidifies two bills, one from Representative Eccles from last year and one from then Representative Hodges from 2 years ago. And both of those bills prohibit our foreign adversaries from acquiring immovable property in the state of Louisiana. And they're designed to protect our infrastructure from attacks from foreign adversaries. And one of the ways that they desire and want to dismantle our infrastructure is by acquiring immovable property in our state. So this bill further solidifies the other two bills that I just talked about and sort of coalesces them together in a very effective way that has tremendous teeth in it. Another thing that this bill does, which is massively important for our elections in light of President Trump's recent executive order, is it imposes certain requirements on the Louisiana Secretary of State, Nancy Landry, before she can proceed with the purchase of electronic voting computers. And here's what it does. It requires the Louisiana Secretary of State to certify before the Louisiana Voting System Commission and both committees, governmental affairs committees in the legislature, that all of the following, that the proposed purchase of voting machines or voting systems, which is what she wants to do, and we know that, is not prohibited as information and communications technology that is designated by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to be an election infrastructure with a nexus to foreign adversaries in violation of federal law. We got to make sure there's no connection between any electronic voting system that she seeks to purchase and any foreign adversary. And that's very important. And therefore not a risk to national security. The U.S. Homeland Security also, she has to certify before the joint committee in the legislature and the Voting System Commission that the U.S. Election Assistance Commission and Homeland Security have not found that the proposed voting system is subject to being compromised through malicious software and unauthorized intrusion into the system by foreign adversaries, and is therefore not a risk to national security. So, and remember, Trump has an EO out right now that we've talked about, Danielle, where he has ordered Homeland Security in conjunction with the Election Administration Commission, whatever it's called, Election Assistance Commission, to do a deep dive forensic evaluation of all electronic voting systems in the country and come to a conclusion about whether or not those systems are secure and reliable and trustworthy. And that's what they're doing right now. So, and she has to be able to certify that Homeland Security and the EAC have in fact concluded that these systems are safe. So and there's no way she can certify that before their report comes out, before they render their formal conclusions to President Trump. So she can't go forward with an RFP. She can't go forward with electronic voting proposal and spend $100 million of our money until she gets that report. That's what this law would require her to do. So it would put a minimum, it would put a pause on her ability to move forward with these machines. And it could end it altogether if Homeland Security and the EAC come back and say, no, these systems are simply not safe. And that's what all the election experts have already said. Haldeman and all the rest of them have said they're not safe. So this could be President Trump's way ultimately of eliminating electronic voting systems altogether. And finally, she has to be able to certify before the Joint Committee and the Voting System Commission that no component parts of any proposed electronic voting systems are manufactured by a foreign adversary and therefore would not be a risk to national security. So all of those things she has to be able to certify before she can move forward with these electronic voting machines if this law passes. Now, I would argue, Danielle, that she shouldn't be going forward anyway.
You took
even
the
though,
words out of my mouth.
yeah, she shouldn't be going forward anyway because of this EO that's pending right now, where the Homeland Security has to do a report and decide whether these things are. So it's just a matter of good, faithful service to the citizens of Louisiana for her to say, you know what, I'm not going to go forward with the electronic voting systems until we get the report in from the Department of Homeland Security and EAC about whether or not they're safe. But there's no law in place now prohibiting her from doing so. It would be horrible political optics, believe me, because what happens if she goes forward, we get all these machines, and then the EO comes down and says, sorry, we can't. You can't use them in federal elections.
Yeah.
And so what do we do with them then? We've wasted $100 million of our money, and that I guarantee you we're never going to get back. So the bottom line is she should, for political reasons, pause the RFP now. But if this law passes, she will have no choice but to pause it. And that's why this is so very important.
Chris, would you explain what you mean by certify? Is this like under penalty of perjury, or does she have to prove, like show evidence that the federal government has already given its mark of approval on this? What do you mean by certify?
She has to testify. She has to testify. And I don't know whether it's under oath. That's a great question. I don't know whether it would be required for her to testify under oath, but certify certainly means that she would have to make a good faith representation before the committee that these electronic voting systems are safe, that there is no nexus to any foreign adversary, and that no component parts of any of these electronic voting systems are made or manufactured by a foreign adversary. We already know right now, Danielle, by the way, that most of these parts come from China. Yeah. They're made in China. And the last time I checked, China is a foreign adversary. So there's no way that she can make that certification right now. No way.
And Chris, just to make a fine point on that, if she were to make that certification, it would be considered malfeasance in office, even if it was not under penalty of perjury.
Yeah, I believe that it absolutely would, because part of her job is faithful, prudent stewardship of our money. And going forward with $100 million of our money for machines that we don't even know if we're going to be able to use. We don't even know if they're safe. She goes forward before the formal findings pursuant to Trump's EO come down on these machines. There's no question I think it would be malfeasance because there's no compelling reason to move forward right now. And there's every good political reason not to, and every practical reason and every financial reason not to. So if she does it, I can assure you, at a minimum, there will be major political fallout for her, and there could be significant legal consequences if this executive order comes back, or these findings which say that these electronic voting systems are not safe, and she's already moved forward and made the investment. It's just not a good thing for her to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will be watching SB 226 like hawks, and we'll be very interested to see any tinkering that happens to this bill. So Moving on to another bill that would engage Secretary of State Nancy Landry, House Bill 405 by Representative Matthew Willard. And he is requiring that the Secretary of State prepare and publish certain information concerning changes in election law. Basically, she's going to have to publish on her website the dates that she intends to enact the laws that have been passed during the legislature. Is that right, Chris?
Yes. And one of the biggest complaints that people who are involved in election security in Louisiana. Yeah, like you.
One of my biggest complaints.
Yeah, it's one of your biggest complaints is the fact that oftentimes we're not given proper notice about proposed changes that the Secretary of State wants to make through administrative rule. We don't know when the various stages of the RFP process. We don't know how to find them. They're not properly publicized. I mean, she puts things up on X all the time to notify the public about various things like when elections are going to be occurring and other things that are non-controversial that people need to know about regarding elections. But it's very difficult to find information about her proposed changes to election law and how she wants to proceed and when she wants to proceed and what stage this RFP process is in. So this bill will require her to prominently post on the Secretary of State's website every important matter concerning election security and the things that she is trying to accomplish so that people have an opportunity to be heard on the issues. And I think it's an important bill for that reason.
Well, and it's a matter of transparency with the citizens, right? I think about Senator Facey's bill that she insisted she was not able to enforce or provide a mechanism for the citizenship, proof of citizenship to vote. She was not able to enforce it by the most critical election of our lifetime in November, had it pushed to January 1st. And we know that is not being enforced yet. There's no implementation of that. There's no notice. You've even mentioned to me, Chris, to the clerks or the registrars on how to proceed with checking for citizenship. How is she planning on doing that? What is her process? What's her personal deadline for doing that? I thought that the enforcement date was the effective date, but apparently it's not.
Exactly. And that's another thing that would have to be published is the parameters and the time frame within which important laws like the one you just said regarding proof of citizenship to register to vote, when it's going to be enforced. This was effective January of this year, and it had already been delayed in the bill at her request. And yet, if you speak to local registrars, they've received little or no guidance on what kind of proof is required, or what they need to ask someone who's registering to vote to produce in order to show that they're actually a citizen and are eligible to vote. There's been little or no guidance. I mean, here we are in April. And this became effective and enforceable in January.
Yeah.
So
we've had two elections since the bill passed. No, three. Right, the October, November, and March.
Yeah, and President Trump has been proclaiming from the mountaintops the importance of demanding proof of citizenship, not just this honor system where you fill something out and they ask you if you're a citizen. And if you say yes, even if they're not, there's no way you can verify it. Right. That's the whole reason why we passed this bill. Yeah. So it's important. And tying it back to Willard's bill, it would require her to put information up about what she's doing, the steps that are being taken, and when bills like this are going to be enforced. So it's an important bill, HB 405, and that's why we're behind it.
Yep, absolutely. Next up is Senate Bill 109 by Senator Alan Seabaugh. And this is a constitutional amendment that would basically, it looks like, prohibit foreign donations in elections. It's closing a loophole. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Under Blake Miguez's constitutional amendment from a couple of years ago, NGAs and foreign powers are already not allowed to donate or give money to elections officials in order to quote unquote help them administer an election, which obviously that's not really what it's for. That's the pretext for it. But remember Zuckerberg,
Yeah.
who pumped in hundreds of millions of dollars into the swing states, into the coffers of these election officials. There's no question that influenced and swung the vote in Biden's favor in those swing states. What this would do would broaden that out, this constitutional amendment, and say no foreign actor and no foreign government can donate at all to any entity, to any candidate in an election. It would completely put a huge wall between foreign actors and foreign entities, or any non-citizen for that matter, donating money into our election process or even to a candidate. And I think it's very important that Representative Seabaugh brings this, and we absolutely would support this as a constitutional amendment. The question I would have, though, is why would this not be being brought in statute? This is something that is clearly within the realm of the legislature to simply pass a law and prohibit this in statute, yet it's being done by way of a constitutional amendment. And maybe Senator Seabaugh's position is that it's that important, that it should be in the Constitution and shouldn't be subject to legislative whim. But that would be the question that I have. But maybe it is something so fundamental because of the importance of keeping foreign influence out of our elections. But I think it is good. The substance of it is absolutely good and would close the loophole that you're talking about.
Yeah. And there is a bill that is being proposed, just a statute, Chris, per your suggestion, and that's House Bill 590. It basically accomplishes the same thing as Senator Seabaugh's bill. Is being brought by new Representative Annie Spell, and it would do the same thing, but just not as a constitutional amendment.
Right. Correct. So, I think, because our Constitution is so long, Danielle, and has been amended so many times, and there's so many things in the Constitution that don't belong there, I would rather this pass as a statute, and we would have it in our election code, rather than being in the Constitution. But it's important. So however it gets there, it gets there.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right. Next up, House Bill 200 by Rep. Dixon McMakin. And this one is related to the Republican Parish Executive Committee in East Baton Rouge Parish. And while that seems like it's a local issue, it could have pretty far-reaching ramifications. Do you want to talk about our opposition to this, Chris?
Yes. Right now in East Baton Rouge Parish and in every RPEC, Republican Parish Executive Committee, those are the local parish Republican boards and commissions that make that endorse candidates for office, that recommend policy parish-wide for the Republican Party, and do a number of things that are very important. These are essentially grassroots organizations, local Republican executive committees that are very close to the people in their respective parishes, and they're all elected. They all have to be elected. If Dixon McMakin's bill passes HB 200, it would allow all members of the Baton Rouge Republican delegation, elected delegation, to be appointed as members of the local RPECs, whether you're talking about, Senator Cassidy, Nancy Landry,
Representative Barbara
Freiberg, and others. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have some good. Emily Chenevier's a good local conservative legislator from our in East Baton Rouge Parish and others. The concern we have is that we don't want the local RPECs to be subject to that kind of political influence by having legislators and statewide elected officials being appointed with voting authority on local RPECs. We believe it's an invitation to corruption. At a minimum, it would create a conflict of interest. I mean, can you imagine, a local legislator being appointed to the RPEC who has a close friend who is running for the RPEC, and who do you think that local legislator is probably going to support just because they have a personal relationship with that person and the power that they bring to it? Can you imagine a Bill Cassidy, even though I can't stand him, I'm using him as an example in this sense because he's got tremendous power. Can you imagine a U.S. senator who has voting authority and influence on a local RPEC? I mean, it just seems like the political influence would just swallow up and adversely affect decisions that should be made by the local RPEC based on the quality and the merit of various candidates. Yeah. I think this is an invitation to corruption. And also, Danielle, there's a real legal issue with this bill as well, because the Louisiana Supreme Court has already ruled a number of years ago in the 90s that the state legislature does not have the constitutional authority to direct or dictate the composition or the electoral processes of local RPECs because they're private organizations. So he's got political problems with this bill, and he's also got legal problems with the bill. I don't know why he's bringing it. We're supposed to be people who are all about local authority, and that government which governs most locally governs best. By inviting legislators into this process and statewide elected officials by appointment, not even having to run for the office, I think also violates that basic principle of federalism. Leave the local RPECs alone.
Well, to me, it's a power grab, Chris. And to me, if Representative McMakin wants to be on the local RPEC, he can run for the local RPEC. It's his right. He can do that. But he doesn't need to be appointed to it. And I don't like this. I feel like this one stinks.
It does stink. And we know the RPECs are generally do a very good job of making the right endorsements. And I've been very impressed in a number of instances when local RPECs, local Republican parish executive committees, go against the broader Republican establishment and endorse candidates based upon genuinely on their conservative credentials, not on who has the most money, not on who has the most power, and not on what the Republican establishment wants. So the local RPECs are real vestiges of real constitutional government that reflects the values of their local communities. And so that's yet another reason why we do not want these local bodies influenced politically in this way, and with the possibility for the kind of corruption and conflicts of interest that would inevitably ensue.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly that kind of political influence may exist already, but it doesn't need a vote. It doesn't need to have a voting seat on the RPEC itself. I mean, pressure comes from all angles in all parts of politics, but
and by the way,
it doesn't need to be institutionalized.
It doesn't need to be institutionalized. And by the way, legislators can run for the RPEC. They're allowed to run for the RPEC, as you just mentioned about Dixon McMakin. So just run for the office if you want. Anybody can run, but the government should not be in the business of appointing people to local RPECs. This is a government of, by, and for the people. If you want to run and the local people who vote in that jurisdiction want you on the RPEC, they'll vote for you. If they don't, they won't. Let's keep it that way.
Agreed. Another one being brought by Rep. McMakin is House Bill 603. And this one, in my view, also stinks. It would basically just give the governor more power. And it's about the appointing process for occupational licensing boards, committees, and authorities. Can you talk about that, Chris?
Yeah, everything from the Louisiana Medical Board to the dentistry regulatory boards to just almost every. There's a list of about 30 of them in this bill. All of the boards that regulate, discipline, and govern the practice of all of these professions in Louisiana. The people on those boards right now under the law, the trade associations associated with these boards, they put forward a group of names and nominees to the governor, and the governor has to appoint to those boards people chosen from those lists that are provided to him by the trade associations. He has to do it. He can't just go pick anybody he wants. If this bill passes, the governor would still have the authority to choose from among the list he's provided, but he would be under no requirement to do so. He could throw it all in the trash can and put on these boards whoever he wants to put on these boards. And as a matter of principle, no matter who the governor is, I do not believe that we need to be vesting more plenary authority and power in the governor in Louisiana. He already has too much power. Yeah. And the last thing we need to be doing is enhancing it and allowing him to handpick members of these boards so that he can control these boards. That's absolutely not where we need to be. We need to be moving in just the opposite direction in Louisiana. So I don't understand this legislation. I don't understand why Dixon McMakin would be in favor of, much less authoring, this vast transfer of power to the governor with respect to these board appointments. But that's what this bill does, and that's why we are opposing it very enthusiastically.
As we do most things.
Well, we don't oppose anything lukewarm.
That's right. Okay, next up is the topic of national security, and there's some pretty interesting bills here. House Bill 307 by Representative Chance Henry will essentially require that anyone who's applying for public assistance in the state of Louisiana, it requires the state official to certify that they are, in fact, a citizen of the United States, and if not, report them to ICE.
Absolutely. And so from now on, if you go and you apply for any kind of public assistance in Louisiana, if this bill passes, you would have to verify and prove that you are a United States citizen. And if you can't do that, not only are you denied benefits, but the state would be required to report your non-citizen status to federal ICE officials. And so it's not like you're just disappointed because you're getting denied benefits. You also get reported to ICE and, in all likelihood, deported once ICE learns that you're in the country illegally. Now, a lot of people in the country, Danielle, as you know, are here, legally. They're not citizens, but they have legal status here. We're not talking about those people. We're talking about people who are here illegally and are subject to immediate deportation. Those are the ones that would have to be reported to ICE and be deported. Another requirement of this is that the public agencies who are providing these services have to file a report annually verifying that everybody who's receiving these benefits are in fact citizens. And so it's not just prospective. We're talking about people who are currently receiving benefits. They have to do a compilation and a record to see if anybody that's receiving them is not a United States citizen. And if they're not, they have to be removed from benefits, and they have to be reported to ICE as well. So I think that this is not only going to halt the illicit distribution of these benefits to illegals going forward, but it could also actually reduce the number of people who are currently receiving them who shouldn't be.
Great. And Chris, there's a similar bill, Senate Bill 100 in the Senate being brought by Senator Blake Miguez that does essentially the same thing. But a question for you on both of these. Do you know, is there a provision, a disciplinary provision, if anyone that's on the state that works for the state that is not perhaps feels sympathetic to the cause of illegal immigrants? If they don't do their job, if they don't faithfully execute this law, is there any disciplinary provision in the bill for that?
I don't know. I don't. Okay. I did not.
We can take a look at that.
We can take a look at that. I did not see an enforcement mechanism or a penalty provision in the bill with respect to any public official who does not follow this law. But if there's not, then I would strongly suggest that the bill be amended to provide an enforcement mechanism and a penalty provision. Because if there's no penalty provision and no enforcement mechanism, I think most people want to obey the law, and most public officials do obey the law. But certainly having that potential stick hanging over their head if they don't, I think is would be a good amendment for this bill.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Next up is Senate Bill 15 by Senator Jay Morris, and it prohibits any act intended to hinder, delay, prevent, or otherwise interfere or thwart with federal immigration enforcement efforts. Well, maybe, Chris, this is enough to handle the question I just had.
Well, it's not exactly the same issue, but there is clearly a penalty provision in this one. Senator Morris absolutely put a penalty provision in here. And this, there's a crime called malfeasance in office in Louisiana. And that obviously, and public officials can be guilty of that for not doing their job properly, for expropriating taxpayer money for their own enrichment. Any number of things constitute malfeasance in office. This would create the following scenario would become malfeasance in office. Anytime a state official refuses to cooperate with federal immigration officials or ICE officials in enforcing federal immigration law. And if they refuse to cooperate, did not provide all the information that is necessary, did not properly report immigration status to federal authorities, then that is malfeasance in office, and it could result in a $5,000 penalty and up to 10 years in prison. So the admonition here is if you're a state official, you need to cooperate fully with federal ICE officials and federal immigration officials in trying to remove illegal immigrants, illegal aliens from our country. And if you don't, not only are you violating civil law, but now it becomes a crime called malfeasance in office if you fail to do that, or if you delay providing information to federal authorities, or in any way interfere with federal immigration law enforcement. You could be prosecuted criminally at this point if it passes. I think it's a good bill because we already know, Danielle, I can't even think of the governor's name, but there have been a couple of governors in various places who have simply refused to cooperate with federal authorities. You may know who they are.
I certainly know there's a handful of mayors. I believe the mayor of Denver and maybe the mayor. I think who is the Pritzker in Illinois? I think
Pritzker has challenged and said you're not going to come in here and take illegal immigrants out of our city. I think maybe even Hochul up in New York has suggested the same thing. So the point is, I think I don't really foresee Governor Landry refusing to cooperate with the federal government with respect to illegal immigrants. But you don't know about other public officials, and public officials come and go. So at a minimum, this is good preemptive legislation just to remind public officials, cooperate with the feds when it comes to federal immigration enforcement.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've all had instances crop up where we could use the advice or skills of a trusted attorney. Whether you're looking at the implications of new laws for your business, signing a contract or a lease, looking to write a will or establish a trust, or even resolve a dispute with your credit card company, Legal Shield has got you covered. For over 50 years, Legal Shield has made it affordable and easy to access a dedicated lawyer. With the app, Legal Shield is like having a lawyer in your back pocket. For covered emergencies, Legal Shield is here for you 24/7, plans to fit any stage of life. The State of Freedom is proud to be teamed up with Legal Shield as clients and affiliates. To learn more or to sign up, visit the Shop Our Partners page on freedomstate.us or check out the link in the show notes. Thank you for supporting the State of Freedom.
All right. And just to round out today, we're going to be talking about some legislation in support of first responders who are so critical to every one of us in this state. And of course, we appreciate them so much, especially during hurricane season. But the first one being brought up is House Bill 320 by Representative Larry Bagley, Chris, and this is related to the EMS.
Yes, and emergency medical services. Right now, certain first responders, like the firemen, the firefighters, they receive $600 a month in supplemental state pay as first responders. What this bill does, it would add to the list of first responders who receive that supplemental $600 a month in state pay. It would add EMS, emergency medical service first responders, to that list. I think it is important because EMS folks are so critical, as you said, Danielle. If we didn't have them, I would love to know the number of lives that they save on an annual basis because of their quick response, their knowledge, their ability. It would probably stagger your mind. There are probably a lot of people alive right now because of the quick skill and quick response of EMS folks. So I think that they should be included among the list of first responders who receive that supplemental $600 a month payment from the state. And so I know Walter Beach, who's a member of LACAG and is an EMS himself, is strongly supporting this legislation, and we are going to support it strongly as well.
Yeah. And next up and last for the day is House Bill 80. It's being brought by Rep. Jason DeWitt, and it would create make linemen qualify as first responders with respect to how they are treated from the Department of Homeland Security. So it gives the governor, I think, the ability to direct the linemen. I think it would mean they could probably move into the state a little bit quicker in case of some, natural disaster. So this would not qualify them for the supplemental pay, but it would put them in a position to move more quickly into position.
Yes, very much so. And I think this is also an important item of legislation, and I think the linemen deserve it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chris, that rounds us out for the day. Hey, we lost you for a second, but I got you back. I was just saying that rounds us out for the day. And I have a couple of announcements. On Friday or Monday, we will come back to you with the second half of our preview, in which we will cover a lot: health and the environment, parental rights, abortion, carbon capture and energy, criminal justice and the right to bring a trial, as well as government efficiency or inefficiency, depending on who you're asking. Join us this Thursday at 10 a.m. Central for our live stream interview with Treasurer Dr. John Fleming to discuss his legislative priorities and his run for Senate. And of course, we will be keeping you basically up to the minute. I think probably LACAG's X page would be the very, very best place to get up to the minute updates, Chris, on legislation as it's moving forward. But please go to lacag.org and sign up for the Action Center alerts. We will want you to be extremely active this session. I think if this most recent election, March 29th election, taught us anything, it was that our voice matters. It is that we have more power than we think we do, and it is time to enforce the will of the people, and that can only be done if you speak up.
Absolutely. As I say all the time, Danielle, JFK said, "We are the boss, and we will get the government we demand and we deserve, so let's demand good government." And if we do that, we're going to win, and we will win consistently. But that's what we have to do. By the way, Danielle, do we have any idea? I know that last session or in 2023, there were just a staggering number of bills that were filed. Do we have any idea, ballpark, how many bills total were filed this session?
Over 850.
850 bills so far.
Yeah.
Pre-filed.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So that could increase dramatically between now and the end of the session. But we're going to keep everybody posted on what we're doing and making sure that everybody knows exactly what's coming down the pike and where we'll be. And we're going to be more active possibly now than we've ever been because of all the importance of not only the bills that we talked about today, but the ones we'll be talking about very soon.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this session. I just have a lot of high hopes. I think that by and large, our legislators want to move this state in the right direction and are bringing forward good bills. I see a lot fewer horrible bills than I've seen in the past so far, so that's heartening. Of course, there are some old stinky ones that keep resurrecting, which we can talk about later. I think many of you would have an inkling about which ones we're talking about or alluding to there, but there are some really great legislation, and I think there's some shows that there's some moves that say that this legislature may now be ready to move the state forward.
And I'm very, very excited, Danielle, about talking about some of these other bills. It's hard for me not to talk about Kathy Edmonston's proposed constitutional amendment to.
Don't
go there.
No spoiler alert. No spoiler alert.
Okay, all right. No spoiler
we got to leave something to come back for, Chris.
We got to come back for the carbon capture stuff and the constitutional amendment stuff. But these are some really, really, really good stuff. And I'm just thrilled to be a part of it.
Me too. Well, Chris, thank you so much for your insight as always. And we will see you in a couple days.
Absolutely.
All right. Hold. If you would keep your thing going.
There was some point in there where I thought it said that my recording had stopped, but that doesn't matter because you got it on your end.
Well, I hope so. You were frozen for most of the recording, but I just kept going because I didn't know what else to do. I was like, well, let's just keep going. So we should be able to pull it one way or the other. I hope.
Where I won't be frozen?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.